Okay, so now I'm going to go into breathing. All ready? Yeah. Well, of course. It's the first thing we got to tackle before we even start. So with breathing, we can think about, so when you see a house being built, right? The house you see, or you see this house and it's beautiful, right? But the most important thing about that house is what you can't see, which is the foundation underneath it. Because if you don't have a good foundation, that house is going to fall. And if that house falls where there's people in it sleeping one night, someone's going to get sued big time, right? But worse than that, somebody could possibly die, right? So foundation is vital, because if you don't have a good foundation in singing, well, your voice could conk out, you could get injury, you cannot have, the full sufficiency of your voice that you want, and so forth, right? Or the range that you want, the power that you want, the sound that you want, blah, 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 right? Make sense so far? So when I'm standing, there it is though, you don't even have to think about it anymore. Your stance is your stance, doesn't change. Oh, and just another thing on the stance, it's not to hold you in bondage to it. All right, so in other words, if you're a player and you're running around, you're doing stuff, you do all this stuff, guess what? When I'm done with all that, I come back to my stance. No one knows that. No one in the audience can be like, hey, look, he's in his stance. Right? Okay. Make sense? All right. Yeah, you can laugh, you're allowed to laugh. So we talk about breathing. So breathing is like the foundation of a house, right? The beauty of a house only exists because of the foundation that it rests on. The beauty of a voice, even though a person can sound good naturally, I don't believe in natural singers, I believe in natural sounding singers. Even though they may sound a very good natural sounding singer, their technique might not be all that great, which then eventually maybe they get into some vocal problems and issues and injuries, and that's what we don't want, right? That's the last thing we want for any singer whatsoever. I don't even care if I don't like your music. The last thing I would want is for your voice to get hurt, So it's about caring for the person versus, whatever. But all kidding aside now, so the general population, when they take a breath, they take what's called a clavicle breath, right? So when we take this clavicle breath, it looks like this. It's this high shoulder, high chest lifting, right? Or power source lifting, right? Now, that's not actually good. I can't get a lot of breath in there. It may feel like I'm getting a lot of breath, but I'm not. It's a shallow breath which leads to a shallow tone, which leads to pushing. Shallow breath becomes a shallow tone, which leads to pushing, right? And the last thing you want to do is dive over the 20-foot diving board, 20 foot high, into a 1 foot pool. Would you want to do that? Absolutely not. You won't see the light of the next day. But the idea here is, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so shallow breath. We don't want a shallow breath because that leads to pushing it eventually, right? So that's what that does. So the general population breathes that way. Believe it or not, it can actually cause more anxiety in a person's life because their breath just can't get lower. And we'll talk about what that means soon. And it can cause tension, a lot of tension. I'm already tight to start singing and feel it. That's not good, right? Now, let me say this though, it's never perfect, right? We're gonna have moments in our singing when we're doing whatever we may run into some issues breathing, but that's just the way it is. It's just never perfect. So we want to replace this clavicle with the release of the abdominals. So when I take a breath, I want that low gut. Can you try that? One more time. Awesome, right? Okay. So now, I know, especially for females, they're like, I don't want this low breath, right? I don't want this low distended, who wants to walk around with a padded out belly? I don't even want to do that, right? Hang on there, that's going to change over time. But for right now, why do I want to do that? Because we want to begin isolating those muscle groups, the abdominals. So this is an abdominal release, not an abdominal breath. This is what we hear a lot, right? Abdominal breathing. Well, I don't breathe into my abdominals, I breathe into my lungs, because that's where the air goes into, right? So what I do is I release, though, the abdominal muscles to what? Create a little more space for my lungs to expand. I said a little more space because there's other ways to create more space for our lungs because they're spongy and elastic and they love to expand when we take in breath. Hence, then we can increase our breath capacity. Make sense? And years ago when I read that, I was like, I need to know how to do that, right? Because I want to sing long lines and feel like I never run out of breath. I was still running out of breath because I wasn't using my breath efficiently. So that's a different animal within itself. But we'll talk about that soon too. But let's go ahead and take that breath one more time. And release it. One more time. So this is what we're going to focus on over the next, including this week, 4 weeks. Okay? So we're going to take it nice and easy. We're just going to be flexible with our abdominals. That's all we're going to want to employ. Nothing else at this point. Okay? Do you have any questions on that? So you notice the stance stays the same. Power source is elevated a little bit. I feel like you're, there you go. All right? And then we're releasing those abdominal muscles when we go to take a breath. We're isolating that muscle group there, right? Which is rectus, transverse, and so forth. Make sense? No questions, right? Okay, so now we're going to go into a breathing exercise that will help us with this even more.